This is Forum. I'm Michael Krasny. We're focusing this hour on academic plagiarism, which has become a widespread problem, some would say ubiquitous, at high schools as well as colleges and universities. And talking with Tim Dodd, who is Executive Director of the Center for Academic Integrity, and with John Berry, founder and CEO of iParadigms. They provide the service turnitin.com. Also with us this morning from iLot Israel is Yasha Harari, partner in schoolsucks.com, and with us in studio, Maggie Sokolic, lecturer and coordinator at UC Berkeley's College of Engineering Technical Communication Program, and Elise Wormuth, Associate Dean, College of Humanities at San Francisco State. Let me go right to your calls, and Peter, good morning. You're on.
Oh, hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to say I think it's really a great thing what John Berry's done, but on the other hand, I kind of found some of his comments about honor codes to be a little bit pejorative, and I've been on both sides of this equation, both as a professor and as a student. And when I was in college, we had an honor code, and I loved it. My first exam was a 3-hour take-home exam, and you know, I'm sure that some people cheated, but I never did, and that was a really valuable experience to me. And I think that somehow trust has to be part of the equation. I mean, on the other hand, I've dealt with people who've cheated and copied essays off of the internet, but I don't have a full answer to it. But we can't. There has to be some trust in there somewhere.
Let's see if we get an answer from John Berry. And John, you also might want to address the comment that was made about sort of finding turnitin.com to be, shall we say, plagiarism proof.
Right. Okay. Well, first the caller's question. I was a little flippant when I said honor codes are, essentially just lip service to the problem. I think honor codes are a fantastic adjunct to, a solution to the problem of cheating, plagiarism in school. I meant to say something very similar to what the person from the Center for Academic Integrity said, and that is it's just one part of the solution. Just as Turnitin is not the solution, it is just one part of the solution. I think that if you have an honor code that you can't enforce with something like Turnitin, it could almost be worse than no honor code at all. Now, with regards to quote-unquote Turnitin-proof papers, I find that a highly implausible idea because every single one of our clients is vetted to be either an academic institution or an instructor at an academic institution. We do not.
Some of them may be working for the paper mills.
Well, that's good, but they better have an email address at an academic institution and prove to us that they are employed at some academic institution. Otherwise, we won't take their business. We do not sell to parents. We don't sell to children. We do not sell to anybody but professors, high school instructors, and their associated institutions, period.
Well, let me thank Peter for his call and move on to more calls. Eve, join us. You're on the air on Forum. Good morning.
Thank you so much. Another great show. I just wanted to make the comment that I worked for years as a corporate writer back in the investment banking sector in New York, and I was really surprised that this is not strictly an academic problem. In the working world, you would constantly see analysts who went to Ivy League schools, who grew up speaking English, who I knew that they knew how to execute a paragraph well, and they would just crib from Barron's, they would crib from the Wall Street Journal, and I would bring it forward to management, and management would simply say, look, this is a petty problem, it's not an issue. I recently returned to school, and I'm amazed by the quality of the papers that I see. People send them to me for proofreading, and I'm happy to do that pro bono, but I think the problem is really a lot larger. It's a problem within the culture that there's not an appreciation for the written word anymore. And I think kids spend a lot of time playing PlayStation, and it's a much bigger problem. It's not so much within the schools; it's within the culture at large.
Well, I think certainly we were agreeing on your point. Tim Dodd seemed to be advancing that, and also talking about just the corporate world, Maggie Sokolic, and dismissing this as a petty problem. That's probably what a lot of professors do too, isn't it?
No, I do hear of a number of professors say, oh, it's minor, it's a paragraph, it's a footnote, it's really not worth all the trouble that it takes. But the problem is that then it, of course, perpetuates it into larger issues. If a paragraph is not a problem, why isn't a full page a problem? Or why shouldn't a whole essay, if it's not an important topic? And a lot of students justify it by saying, well, it's not in my major. And that becomes the sort of qualification. Well, I'm a biology major, and this is just English, and so it's not going to affect me professionally or personally. So what's the big deal?
Let me go to more calls. Deep, thanks for waiting. You're on. Good morning.
Morning, Michael. Great program. I find that in our country we tend to, stifle the creativity in our kids. Arts programs get defunded. And I grew up in India, as you can recognize from my accent, and my parents paid less than $1 a month for my monthly education at one of the best schools in Bombay. And when I compare what I was taught in my school in India compared to what the kids are learning over here in some of the good schools in Palo Alto, they have an appalling knowledge of world geography, history, creativity. And sometimes, kids need to be told what to learn. We give too much of freedom to kids in this country. And then we are surprised that all the jobs are going to India. People in India take pride in their level of education. When you get married, you have your wedding invitation which says Kim Singh and all of his degrees on the invitation, and the wife's name and all her degrees on the invitation. Here, as soon as the kid is 16 years old, they want to run out of home and work at McDonald's.
So once again, Tim Dodd, we're looking at the culture here, aren't we?
A lot of truth in the idea that sometimes we talk about the college degree but don't talk enough about the education involved, that we really haven't created a sense in students that it is the knowledge that they acquire that is the key to living the successful life and being the successful family member or the successful businessman. And it's not just the degree or the status of the degree. I also agree with that previous point about, we're not doing a good job of teaching students to find their voice. This idea that education is about the creative exercise in creating your own voice, and not just an exercise in, creating a compilation of everybody else's points and calling that a paper. I mean, that's sort of the small point, but you combine that with all the larger points we've discussed, and you understand the kind of mixed message, the kind of confused messaging that students bring to high school and college.
They say, at least Warmoth, some do, that the problem may be the nature of the assignments themselves, again, that to write, say, an essay that is a research paper or a term paper may be a good academic exercise, and it may increase one's knowledge, but it doesn't necessarily apply to what is so often characterized as the real world, and it doesn't necessarily give you skills that you need in that world. That seem like a fair criticism to you?
Yes and no. I think there are things that we do in academia that might not have direct parallels to the real world, but they still have value in terms of educating students and teaching them to think critically. But the problem is that a lot of some faculty members may not know how to construct assignments so that they will invite students to use their critical thinking and so on. The other issue is that faculty tend to use the same assignments over and over again. And I was picking up my son from swimming lessons one day and heard his swimming teacher talk to a friend who was at community college, and the friend said, "Oh, I'm taking such and such a class," and the teacher said, "Oh, I have all my papers from last semester. I'll just give them to you." And so if the teacher doesn't ever change up the assignments, then there are papers that float around in the dorms in various places, and in some ways you get what you ask for.
You also have people in the dorms who avail themselves of others in the dorms who may be sterling students and willing to write for money and all of that sort of thing. And I don't know what you do about that. I mean, you give an exam, let's say, and you see a student has a great disparity in terms of expression in the exam from what the student has turned in the way of an essay, and never the twain shall meet, and you sit the student down and you say, what's going on here? But other than that, there's really nothing that you can offer in the way of incontrovertible proof.
One of the things I recommend to faculty is that they get some writing in class early in the semester that they don't return to the student, that they just hang on to, and that you can use as a kind of a reference point when you get a paper from out of class from a student.
An excellent idea, but you still have the difficulty of saying this is
no,
not...
I need to say the but about that, because one of the things that a student will argue, and sometimes perfectly justifiably, is that they spend a lot of time out of class doing multiple drafts and proof